If you were to pull Jesus out of Western culture, it would not be recognizable. The university has no teaching of good and bad, right and wrong. None. It is shocking to many people to realize that, but it's simply true.
Nobody knows or wants to say what they think the purpose of education is, of higher education in particular. And that's a sad state of affairs.
A younger generation very much wants to understand the big picture. You know, we hear it so much today that, well, I may not be religious in any formal sense, but I consider myself to be very spiritual. And that idea of being spiritual also has something to do with that desire to somehow know what it's all about, to get a grasp of the overall scheme of things. And we're not finding that these days in much of higher education.
Students are presented with a kind of dichotomy that either they are intellectually lively and engaged and committed to free inquiry, or they're Christians. What should educated citizens in an advanced technological democracy, what should they know? What should we all know? There's no agreement about this. There's none. That's a sign, I think, an early warning sign of a culture that's in trouble. If we don't know what we want to pass on to the next generation or why, then we need to do some serious thinking.
The great book's education is not the only way to educate. But what it does is it makes sure that we don't lose what has been achieved in the past for the sake of contemporary projects that, for all we can tell, and some of them we can tell, may lead to nothing.
It requires looking very carefully at the great philosophers of the Western tradition, looking at what they get right, what they may not get right, what's disputable in the tradition, and learning how to think.
The great books kind of curriculum, the study of some of the classical writings of the world, really, certainly of the Western world, but of civilization. And I got to tell you, if I had to start all over again, that's the kind of school I'd like to go to.
Christian colleges tend to be defensive, to not take seriously the alternatives that are offered by people who are thought to be the enemies of the faith, and not to study them carefully. You need to have read Darwin, and not just heard about him. Whoever else is being represented, you need to read them, and not just be defensive and get the news that they're all wrong, but rather understand their thought and take them as serious fellow workers in the problem of understanding or finding a basis in knowledge for human existence. The immediate needs we see around us are obvious and important, but then tomorrow the immediate needs will be largely determined by the minds that are produced today.
We really do need careful thinking. I mean, one of the problems that is giving rise to the conflict and the poverty and the injustice and the superstition in the world is the lack of carefully thought out understanding of the fundamental issues of life.
What will I give my support to? It is really important to understand the significance of the mind.
What you have with the foundation and with C.S. Lewis College and the other ancillary activities is the right kind of education that's going to promote an understanding of what human flourishing means. How can we know what means to use to promote a more humane and more flourishing society if we don't know what the end looks like?
So the idea that in the midst of all of this, we need to sit around thinking, yes, we do. I mean, C.S. Lewis was very clear about that when he said, you know, that the battle is always going on. It's been going on from the beginning.
Ask yourself, what is human life without knowledge of good and evil? And you see the importance of this task.